Welcome to Cyber UK TV. Thank you for joining us. We've got Anne Duncan here, who is the Chief Information Officer at the US Department of Energy. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you finding Cyber UK this year?
So, Marcia, it's great to join you in Cyber UK. As always, it's amazing. It's great to catch up with people I know, meet new people, see what the vendors are doing, hear the great talks. It's been super, so thank you.
Amazing. And we had a great panel session today on securing future systems, the challenge of net zero. So I wanted to bring a bit of that discussion here. Can you tell us a bit about what you see as the challenge of net zero and the role you have in that?
Yeah, so the challenge of net zero is, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, right? But I'll pick one in the interest of time. One is simply the huge proliferation of devices on the network. When you look at all these distributed energy resources, which you're going to need to get to net zero, I think net zero is going to require, household solar, household batteries, in addition to these large banks of resources. So those distributed resources across the grid, number one, there's just a whole lot more entry points into the grid. There's a lot more devices there, but also many of those are secured by consumers. And we know that consumers struggle to secure their networks in a lot of cases. And so now we're saying, okay, here's your network, which may or not be secured, and there are batteries on there, there are solar panels on there, and there's a path to the grid on your network. So there's many, many challenges, but that's one I would highlight as something where we have to really pay attention, and we have to get back to the idea that is in the National Cyber Strategy for the U.S. about the responsibility really going to those who can handle it, and that is we want large companies, the government, to be responsible. So we're going to have to figure out how to help those consumers secure that network and secure that internet so that the grid stays secure.
Brilliant. One of the things that I see happening is our understanding of what is critical is changing. We spoke on the panel about the really specific definition that the UK has of critical national infrastructure. How do you see the kind of move to net zero changing what we think of as critical?
So I think that we have to broaden the definition of critical infrastructure. And we had that conversation on the panel. It doesn't just mean somebody's going to die, right? In the U.S., we have a number of sectors, and I can never remember the right number, but they encompass healthcare and banking and energy and lots of things that aren't necessarily directly related to somebody being injured or dying just because there was a problem in that infrastructure immediately. But if you don't have the internet, life's going to be pretty bad, for example, now. So as we move forward, every time we get new technologies, those very quickly become critical infrastructure. So net zero, we say, well, those home solar panels, those home batteries are going to become critical infrastructure because there's going to be so many of them on the grid that we aren't going to be able to manage our grid without them. Your car may become part of critical infrastructure as we start bringing battery power back from cars into the network. So we don't know what it's going to be, but we know it's going to change. We know it changed when the internet came online. We know it changed when phones came online, and that those will continue to change, and we need to be prepared to protect whatever those things are.
And I think there's something there about being flexible and thinking about what the public think of as critical, which hasn't always been our starting point, but I think it's where we're all going to increasingly move in the future when we're thinking about how we protect the things that matter most. How do you think that we can secure the expanding and kind of complex attack surface that is going to come with these changes?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is minimize your attack surface. I just don't think we can do that anymore, right? There's just no way. So yeah, how do we do that? And I think there's a couple things. So number one is secure by design, and that's meaning that we ask people who are designing technology to build in security. It's sort of like we started talking about with software a number of years ago, and we want to expand that to hardware, to the Internet of Things, so they're secure by design. So I can't fail to remove the default password or to put a password on that device at my house because I'm forced to put a secure password on that. I can't use the default. Those are the kinds of things that we have to put in place to ensure that those are secure by design. And then beyond that, we need to apply defense in depth. And you know what that is, but for people who maybe don't know, that means you want multiple layers of defense out there that will ensure that if you defeat one thing or if someone makes a mistake, that there's another piece of the defense that will protect you. So, it's having a multi-factor authentication and a network that is segmented, for example. So lots of things you put in place to secure that, and then doing those things so that poor cyber hygiene in terms of the users can't break that. So the users almost have that done for them automatically.
That's brilliant. And I think one of the things that I was struck by the first time I came to your conference that you hold annually was kind of how your approach to secure by design and how much you are kind of pushing forward on that and really taking a really impressive lead. And I think on the move to net zero, I think we have an opportunity to do secure by design in a way that we don't with some of our legacy systems. So it does seem like a kind of like a wonderful opportunity. What role do you think regulators and government should play in building resilience into those future critical systems?
So I think that the government has the opportunity to set standards that can help tremendously. And we try and figure out in the U.S. how we can set some standards around cybersecurity of systems. That's challenging because it's not like Energy Star, where we can say this is the energy of this device and it's very energy efficient, or it's not. We can try and set design standards. We can try and set security standards that will enable that. But it's tough to actually be able to say this device is secure on any given day. So that's hard for consumers to manage from that standpoint. From a more industrial scale, I think the regulators do play a huge role. I think our regulators need to continue to be forward-thinking. Right? We need to develop more of a partnership. And I think actually the regulators in the U.S. government are very interested in partnering, but we have to make the private sector feel comfortable with the idea that we are here to partner. And I'm not a regulator at DOE, that's somebody else in the energy sector, but as regulators, they're here to partner, not to play a game of gotcha, right? So we want to help you, we want to identify your challenges, we want to help you solve those. We'd rather do that than fine you. That's sort of the approach that I think we're trying to move regulation to. That doesn't mean no one would ever get fined by a regulator, but the goal is to help them be better so that they don't end up in a situation where they're fined for failing, but that they're helped to be successful. So I think that's a real challenge, and I think that those of us within the government who are not regulators have the opportunity to help organizations that may be a little more forthcoming with us as well, so we can work both sides of that together.
100%, and that's the kind of position that we're in NCSC, where we're not the regulator, but we work really closely with the regulator and with industry and with our lead government departments, and really it's about kind of working with that whole system. We always say cybersecurity is a team sport, but it really is, and kind of bringing everyone together around that is incredibly helpful. And I feel like the only way we're going to tackle the challenges that we're going to have with this increasingly complex world.
Absolutely.
One of the things that came up at the panel, which I thought was interesting, and I didn't know that we were going to go there, was about skills. And you had some interesting comments about skills. I wondered if you wanted to touch on that at all.
Yes, we did. We talked about the need for cybersecurity staff. And one of the things I said was we have to start really young. I mean, I know it's tempting to look at just at college students or just at the workforce, but we have little girls who are losing interest in science and technology as early as second grade. So we are losing our opportunity with half the workforce, potentially when they're 6 or 7 years old. So we've got to get into schools early to make little boys and little girls believe that technology is a future job for them, that cybersecurity can be fun and exciting, so that we can build the workforce of the future. And I know it's a long wait for those kids who are 6 and 7, but if we don't train them, they won't be available. It'll be even longer wait. So we got to work all ages. The other thing I didn't say in the panel, but one of the things we do at DOE, and I know you're familiar with this from visiting us, is we do our internship program that's aimed at students from underserved communities. So trying to get those kids who haven't had great opportunities into DOE so we can create more diversity, and also so we can ensure those students who might have not had an opportunity on a technology job to have that opportunity, because that is obviously a hidden workforce for us, those folks who didn't have the opportunity to get the education, who didn't have the internships, who didn't know about the jobs in government, and get them in our door.
And that's always one of my favourite things, coming and meeting those students. That's always been a real highlight for me, and something that I'm really passionate about and the NCSE really care about as well. And thank you so much for coming to Cyber UK. Thank you for all of your wonderful remarks on the panel and here on Cyber TV. And we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcia. It's always great to be here.
Great.